the premier university of Ghana, Alban, corrupted to Legon. May the Almighty God continue to bless you. I must say that I'm here because the alumni wisely decided to use some beautiful babies and added one of my girlfriends who is seated right in front of me. Mrs. Sylvia Boy has been my girlfriend for centuries. My sister is just seated by her. That is why I didn't have a friend in Volta Hall. If not, I had friends all over the university. And it's been a struggle from alumni, whether I was in Legon or Commonwealth or Aquafo or Saba Hall, because I was always available. And these ladies, you can see what you've done. Were always in my office, and they did all they could to get me to block today to come and deliver this lecture. Please, they deserve more than applause. So here I am to deliver this lecture. And I will, with the kind permission of the chairperson, adopt the protocol already established and thank all of you for your presence. I'm so grateful to this great center of learning, the University of Ghana, Legon, and its Alumni Association for the distinct honor of inviting me to deliver this year's lecture on the topic 30 years of parliamentary democracy in Ghana, the journey thus far. At a time when our country is about to face the greatest test of the resilience of our democracy since the start of the Fourth Republic, this places on me a heavy responsibility to be candid and honest to compatriots about Ghana's performance thus far. But before I do that, I want to salute all previous speakers on these anniversaries, and in particular, Dr. Tony Otin-Jesse, who delivered last year's lecture, as you've all been told. Madam Chair, the last 32 years have been historic in Ghana's democratic journey. Our country has witnessed uninterrupted parliamentary democracy compared to its past checkered history of episodic democratic rule with some interventions of varied descriptions since independence in 1957. The Parliament of Ghana has been a casualty of unintended consequences during these numerous periods of interventions. So the rebirth of constitutional rule came on the back of many years of a search of what the then leaders termed true democracy. And according to them, They envisioned a concept of democracy of, to quote, not merely a conclave of the learned few or those who consider themselves as the political elite, unquote. This search was carried out through the medium of regional seminars designed to solicit the views of the public. The result was the unique structure of the 1992 Constitution as a governance framework in which the traditions of both liberal and participatory democracy were meshed in what was said to be a mutually reinforcing manner. Since January 1993, Ghana has been the driver of what has been generally described as democracy in the West Africa sub-region and beyond. Our system was touted by many analysts, including our own Professor Jima Brady and Professor Nensen, as one of the political success stories in Africa. In fact, for close to a quarter of a century, our sub-region was said to have made more democratic progress than all regions of the continent. And as Freedom House, a respected non-governmental organization which tracks democracy worldwide, observed in its 2020 report, I quote, "Open elections and regular leadership transitions were becoming close to the norm in West Africa. Regrettably, in recent years, the region that showed the fastest decline in political rights and civil liberties has been West Africa. Thankfully, Ghana remains intact and stable, marking a significant milestone in our 30-year political history in 2022, albeit not without its own challenges. Madam Chair, my presentation today is a deep reflection of Ghana's democracy journey, with a focus on Parliament as the central institution of democratic governance. The first to the 8th Parliament of the 4th Republic of Ghana came in handy as the centerpiece of the presentation. And this presentation begins by tracing the evolution of these parliaments of the 4th Republic, and as we've been told, we look at the character, the form, the nature and peculiarities of those parliaments through the lens of the changing dynamics brought by each electoral cycle. It then carefully examines the successes we have achieved. Following that, the presentation looks at the factors that have constrained the 8 parliaments in effectively performing their duties and living up to the expectations of our compatriots. These examinations have been considered in the global context of democracy and the severe headwinds that every single episode faces, and how these have impacted Ghana's democratic process. I had to run away from venturing into the unknown, as was required of me, because usually I don't want to disappoint. Give me a prediction that I have no good basis to predict. So I shied away from that aspect of the requirement of my paper. And so the paper will conclude with some food for thought to all patriots of our beloved nation, Ghana. And so I'll start with the evolution of Parliament of the Fourth Republic. Madam Chair, the Fourth Republic has so far produced 8 terms of Ghana's product of what is generally referred to in the Commonwealth as Parliament or House of Representatives. The very first to the 7 parliaments I had the privilege to be an active player. And the current 8th one, I have the blessing and singular honor to occupy the chair of the House as the Speaker. The first Parliament started 7th January 1993 and ended its term on the 6th of January 1997. And this marked the beginning of our march from an unelected rule to an elected government, which ushered in the Fourth Republic as well as the re-establishment of democratic governance in the country. This was after the adoption of the new Constitution, the Constitution 1992, by the people through a referendum as the supreme law of our land. Then followed the 1992 parliamentary elections, which produced a contested parliament. An alliance of opposition political parties boycotted the parliamentary elections on the grounds that the presidential elections conducted earlier on had been manipulated. The Speaker of Parliament elected by the first Parliament was Right Honorable Justice Daniel Francis Kwepe Annan, a retired justice of the highest court of the land at the time and a stalwart of the Provisional National Defense Council and the National Democratic Congress, NDC. The political representation in the first Parliament saw the NDC emerge as the dominant party with an overwhelming majority of 189 out of the 200 seats in Parliament. The National Convention Party, that's NCP, ABRO, held 8 seats, while every Ghanaian living everywhere, EGLE party, secured 1 seat. I know people wrongly refer to it as Eagle. It's not Eagle, it's EGLE. Additionally, there were 2 independent members of Parliament, and the 2 were really a mouthful. A significant feature of this first Parliament was that a number of opposition parties, including the New Patriotic Party, the NPP, boycotted the parliamentary elections on account of allegations that the presidential elections had been manipulated by the Electoral Commission with the active participation of the government of the day in favor of its offshoot, the NDC. The NDC domination of the parliament, in alliance with comrade parties, made Ghanaians refer to it as a one-party parliament. It was, however, a multi-party and a plural parliament. In fact, Professor Nensen adjudged it as one of the best parliaments so far produced by this country. But this criticism compelled the then President Rawlings, to express his faith in the Parliament in a public statement in these words: and I quote, "Even if the present composition of parliament is like a one-party system, there is so much trading in logic and criticism that it will serve the ends of democracy." Madam Chair, the gender demographics of the first parliament was notably skewed, like all successive ones, with men occupying 184 seats and women holding only 16 seats, making up about 8% of the total number of seats. This disparity highlighted the challenges in efforts to achieve gender equality in political representation. The second parliament followed suit, running from January 1997 to January 2001, with Right Honorable Justice Annan continuing to serve as the Speaker of Parliament. His re-election for a second term marked a significant milestone in Ghana's legislative history, making him the only individual to have held the position of the Speaker for 2 consecutive terms in the Fourth Republic. The NDC maintained a majority with 133 seats. The New Patriotic Party, NPP, who had previously boycotted the 1992 parliamentary polls, emerged as a prominent opposition force with 61 seats, representing 30% of seats in the parliament. The PCP, that is People's Convention Party, and the PNC, People's National Convention, held 5 and 1 seats respectively. The gender representation in the second parliament continued to show a vast disparity, with men significantly outnumbering the women. There were 180 males as against 20 females. So women representation witnessed a marginal increase from 8% to 10%. Madam Chair, the third parliament, which ran from January 2001 to January 2005, marked a very important moment for our democratic journey. The opposition MPP won a runoff presidential elections on December 28, 2000, after none of the contesting parties was able to get the required more than 50% valid votes cast. It set the tone for what has become a very unique part of our democratic history, the peaceful transfer of power from one party to another. In fact, it signaled the start of the stability of our democracy. It ushered a transition in leadership at both the executive and the legislature. While President John Agyekum Kufuor took over the presidency from President Jerry John Rawlings in Parliament, Right Honorable Peter Ala Ajete succeeded Right Honorable Justice Annan as the Speaker of the Parliament, a person he described as his mentor. For the first time since the inception of the Fourth Republic, a political party other than the NDC held the majority in Parliament. The NPP secured 100 seats in Parliament, giving it a slight majority over the NDC, which held 92 seats. This change signified a more competitive and pluralistic political environment. The PNC gathered only 3 seats, while the CPP held on to only 1 seat. Independent members of Parliament who were candidates that disagreed with the results of the NDC primaries took 4 seats in Parliament. This added up to the diversity of the representation in the Third Parliament. The Third Parliament has been described by political observers as having played a key role in the emergence of parliamentary democracy in the country. In part, this reflected the fact that the substantial NDC opposition was able to bring its considerable executive experience and familiarity with the rules of engagement in Parliament to bear on the business of the House. The Third Parliament was composed of 182 males and only 18 females, representing about 9% of the total number of parliamentary seats. And this clearly indicates a decrease in women representation in Parliament. The youth managed to take 11% of the seats. In the fourth Parliament, the leadership of Parliament changed. It moved from the stewardship of Right Honourable Peter Alajete to that of Right Honourable Ebenezer Virginia Sechi Hughes. And you will recall that I nominated Right Honourable Peter Alajete to contest the Right Honourable Ebenezer Virginia Sechi Hughes. This was an interesting episode. The fourth Parliament witnessed also an increase in electoral districts. There was an expansion due to the creation of 30 new constituencies. Consequently, the number of members of Parliament increased from 200 to 230. The MPP held a majority of 128 seats out of the 230 seats. The NDC held onto 94 seats and continued to be a strong opposition force. The PNC had 4 seats, while the CPP improved to 3 seats. 1 independent member occupied the remaining seats. The fourth Parliament was composed of 206 males and 24 females. There was a noticeable but marginal increase in the number of women in Parliament, rising from 18 to 24. In the fourth Parliament, therefore, women made up about 12% of the seats in the House. Madam Chair, let me now turn to the fifth Parliament. And the account of the presidential elections did not produce a winner. And there was a general runoff, followed by a Tayin constituency delayed elections 5 days later on the 2nd of January 2009. Tayin is one of the constituencies in the Bono region. This legislature was very historic. First, we had a peaceful transfer of power, the opposition NDC taking the reins of power from the ruling New Patriotic Party. The composition of the fifth Parliament included a mix of political parties. NDC held a slight majority with 116 seats, while the MPP followed with 107 seats. The presence of CPP, 1 seat, and PNC, 2 seats. Although minimal, along with the independent 4 seats, contributed to the multi-party representation in Parliament. The fifth Parliament was comprised of 210 males and 20 females, representing 8.7% of parliamentarians, and this surely reflected a decrease in the percentage of female representation in Parliament. One of the most significant features of the fifth Parliament included the election of the first ever female Speaker of Parliament, the Right Honourable Justice Joyce Adeline Bamford Addo. Her election represented a significant step forward for gender equality in Ghanaian politics and provided a role model for women in politics and leadership. While the election of the first female Speaker was seen as a boost to gender governance, the maintenance of the same percentage of female who have been elected to Parliament highlighted the persistent need for more concerted efforts to promote gender equality and participation of women in Ghanaian politics. The Safe Parliament 2013 to 2016 was for the first time in the history of the Fourth Republic led by a sitting member of Parliament, the Right Honourable Edward Kobla Do Ajahu, as the Speaker of Parliament. In accord with the dictates of the Constitution, he had to resign his seat as a member of Parliament for a by-election to be held. In the Safe Parliament also, the number of parliamentary seats increased from 230 to 275. The size of the chamber never increased. The composition of the Safe Parliament included 4 political parties and independent members of Parliament. The NDC held a majority of 151 seats. The MPP secured 120 seats, maintaining a strong opposition presence. Both the CPP and the PNC held single seats. There were 3 independent members of Parliament, and the gender composition was 244 males to 31 females. Another significant development in the Safe Parliament was the number of young people who made it to Parliament. Out of the 275 members of Parliament, 42 were young people. Young here meaning between the ages of 15 to 35 years. And they represented 15% of the total number of members of Parliament. The 7th Parliament from 2017 to 2021 saw yet another peaceful transition of Parliament from the NDC to the NPP. The legislature was led this time by the Right Honourable Aaron Mike Okoye as the Speaker of Parliament. The 7th Parliament was composed of only 2 political parties, the NPP and the NDC, who you often refer to as the 2 major political parties in the country. The NPP held a substantial majority with 169 seats, while the NDC secured 106 seats. The 7th Parliament constituted and comprised of 237 males and only 38 females. But this time around, there was a quantum leap in the percentage to 15.5% of the total number of parliamentarians, signifying a steady rise in the percentage of female representation in Parliament. Apart from the increase in women representation in the Parliament, a visible composition of the 7th Parliament was the disappearance of the smaller parties, leaving only the NDC and the NPP with representation in the House. Ghana had thus moved from a multi-party system to a duopoly. Like the State Parliament, there was a notable presence of the youth. We had as many as 44 members of Parliament being youthful, and that represented 16% of the total number. The 8th Parliament which I preside over, is very, very unique, and at the same time historic. Its uniqueness stems from many aspects. The most visibly unique feature derives from the fact that for the first time in our history, we had an equally divided parliament, a hung parliament. Both the NPP and the NDC hold 137 seats apiece. The dominance of the two parties in the politics of the country became pronounced. The only independent candidate, a member of parliament in the House, a former member of parliament of the New Patriotic Party, formally declared in writing to support the New Patriotic Party in the conduct of parliamentary business, making the NPP and the independent member to constitute the majority group. And that was my landmark ruling of January 15, 2021. Both parties disagreed with me, and that is understandable. And so in Parliament today, we have no majority party and no minority party. We have co-equals in a duopoly parliament. Another unique feature of the 8th Parliament is a female representation. While there is a marginal increase in women representation, like the House itself, each party has 20 female members of parliament apiece, making a total of 40 female members of parliament. And so, if there's a challenge, 1-to-1, open battle, single combat, and the Speaker is asked to mediate. But this increase brings the representation of women to approximately 14.5%. Regrettably, the number of young people saw a dip from 44 in the 7th Parliament to 33 in the 8th Parliament, and that is from 16% to about 12%. The Parliament is also historic in the sense that for the first time in our history, a ruling party failed to secure the speakership of the legislature. The Speaker of the 8th Parliament is from the party not in control of the executive arm of the government of the day. The Speaker, a former NDC member, a long-standing leader of Parliament, now presides over the House as the Speaker and chairs the Parliamentary Service Board. A very difficult role to play. In its uniqueness, the 8th Parliament has supported the fight towards increasing female representation in Parliament and public spaces. And the Parliament was instrumental in the passage of the Affirmative Action Gender Equity Bill into an act after almost 2 decades of national deliberations. I must say that I had to be tough. If not, it wouldn't also have succeeded. There are a lot of opposition forces. But please, I promise you, my girlfriend, we will succeed. The 8th Parliament further consummated many reforms, including the adoption of new standing orders in January 2024. And that was another long journey from 2002. And Parliament had tried in vain to update and revise its standing orders. But this time around, we had no option but to bite the bullet. Because I was called upon to apply rules that deals with a majoritarian parliament to that of a hung parliament. And it was not easy in the early days. Many of you did not realize the challenge we had. We have also been able now, after a very long time, to bring into fruition a new organogram for the parliamentary service. The staff, some of who are here, sat on the same seat for over 20 years without promotion because the organogram was stunted, and therefore morale was very low, and there was no space to even recruit the necessary critical technical staff to support Parliament. Then also we'll be able to establish a citizens bureau which is aimed at creating more space and facilitating citizens' access to Parliament. And this is also to enable Parliament to receive quick feedback from civil society organizations and other stakeholders, as well as providing civil society organizations the platform to make valuable inputs into the work of Parliament. Madam Chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is the journey of Parliament thus far. The country has moved from a multi-party Parliament to a duopoly, a majoritarian system to a hung Parliament, low women and youth representation, and occasionally minimal people with disability presence, and other social groups representation almost next to nothing. Gender equity and equality is a far cry, particularly in our Parliament, and I'm sure in the public space. It is one of the lowest in Africa. Ghana's program on women empowerment is long on words, but short on delivery. The country is here to address the issue of inclusive Parliament, thus leaving nobody behind in the decision-making process. In addition to the above is the disturbing high turnover of members of Parliament in the Fourth Republic. By the tenure of the Sixth Parliament, I was the only remaining member of Parliament from the first Parliament in the House. Out of the 200, only your truly was left. The 199 had all disengaged. As at now, there is none. Since as a speaker, I'm no longer a member of Parliament. That is the concept we adopted. The only survivor from the first 61 members of Parliament from the New Patriotic Party in the second Parliament is Honorable Oseche Mensah Bonsu, who has also just volunteered and decided to opt out of the next Parliament. And so that will also be 0. Madam Chair, I'll just give you a few statistics. In the 1996 elections, that is the end of the first Parliament of the Fourth Republic, only 69 of the 200 members of Parliament returned to the House. 112 were returned from the second to the third Parliament following the 2000 elections. Most members of Parliament do not go past one term of office, only 4 years, and they are gone. For instance, the 7th Parliament had 182 new entrants in the 275-member chamber, and only 92 continuing members, most of whom cannot be described as old hands. This high attrition rate of members of parliament is affecting the growth and development of parliament in so many ways, such that currently there are second-term members of parliament who are holding leadership positions. Also, the effectiveness of parliament as a valuable institutional memory and experience is being quickly lost. The strength of every parliament is in experience. It takes time and resources to train a member of parliament to understand and be able to practice the culture and law of parliament, and to cultivate the right attitude, habits, skills, and competences to be an effective and efficient member of parliament. But this is our story. This is where we are. But we've not labored in vain. We have made some achievements, and there are some dividends for our democracy. So despite the above shortcomings, there are some achievements for us to celebrate. And permit me to remind participants of some of the achievements of this 30 or 32-year journey. For the sake of brevity, I'll limit myself to those I consider to be transformational. And the first is political stability. Political stability is generally the perception of the likelihood that a government or a regime will not be destabilized or overthrown by unconstitutional or violent means, including politically motivated violence and terrorism. For the last 32 years, our country has maintained a stable democratic system with peaceful transfers of parliament. This has produced for our country a stable political system. To a large extent, our political system is seen to be legitimate. Leaders are elected and not imposed. They are chosen from processes that are perceived as fair and representative. This legitimacy has helped ensure that the successive governments and legislatures have the broad support of citizens, reducing the likelihood of widespread dissent or unrest that characterized the early years of our nationhood. Thanks to the stability of our political system, our country belongs to the group of nations that are characterized as free. The second is the expansion of the civic space. Put simply, civic space is the political, legislative, social, and economic environment which enables citizens to come together, share their interests and concerns, and act to influence and shape their societies. Civic space enables people to perceive multiple, at times competing points of view, both individually and collectively. An unfettered civic space is crucial for fostering a vibrant democratic society where diverse voices can be heard and where individuals have the opportunity to contribute to shaping their communities and countries. Madam Chair, over the last 30 years, a key cornerstone of the expansion of our civic space has been the legal and institutional framework that successive legislatures have helped to establish. We have passed laws and structured institutions that protect fundamental rights such as freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of association. These rights have largely been upheld and not unduly restricted by the government or other entities. We have also encouraged public participation in our governance by creating mechanisms for citizens to engage in decision-making processes. On the part of Parliament, we have consistently made efforts to open the institution to the public and have gone as far as taking Parliament to the people. The first Parliament initiated quarterly public forums, and that was in 1994. And then later in 1997, the Speaker's breakfast meetings. In 2005, Parliament introduced, in addition, a social outreach program where the Speaker and a cross-section of members of Parliament moved to local communities to answer pertinent questions about their stewardship. The concept of the Youth Parliament was also introduced in various tertiary institutions and communities in the country. And I'm happy there's one very vibrant one in this August University. Two notable developments by my leadership are the Speaker Seminal Lecture Series and a masterstroke, a Citizens Bureau within the Parliament of Ghana, an open, inclusive, and participatory mechanism, the first of its kind in the continent of Africa. This bureau is not only on paper. To comprehensively and effectively implement these initiatives I just referred to, Parliament upgraded the Public Affairs Department to a subdivision with the creation of 3 departments: 1 for public engagement, 2 media relations, and 3 broadcasting. The Speaker Seminar Lecture Series, Public Forum, breakfast meetings, and the Citizens Bureau are driven by the Public Affairs Subdivision of the Parliamentary Service. And to quote one of our illustrious sons in the monitoring of parliaments in Africa, Mr. Samuel Obeng of PN Africa, this is what he had to say. I quote, "Together with civil society members, activists, and change makers, we illuminate the path towards a more participatory, accountable, and just democracy. One where Parliament of Ghana becomes not just an institution, but a living embodiment of the hopes and dreams of his people," unquote. This is what we commence, and it is in motion. These efforts have earned Ghana a place of pride as having the most open parliament in the continent, according to the Open Parliament Initiative Index. We won the first in 2022. We are being assessed this year, and I want to assure you, we will not allow any country to take it away from us. But, Madam Chair, I have to be quick to add that while our civic space has been degraded from marginally narrowed to obstructed nationally, based on the 2023 research by Civicus and the West African Civil Society Institute, drawing on recent political happenings in our country, by and large, I can say there has been more expansion than narrowing or obstruction of our civic space in the last 30 years. Those who are young enough experienced the years before 30, and they can share that with you as to where we came from. The next achievement is press freedom. Let me borrow from the Media Foundation for West Africa. The foundation says that a free and independent press is critical to the democratization of countries. It is an enabler of the enjoyment of the right of freedom of expression, a vehicle for accountable and responsive governance, and a channel for political expression of a diversity of groups and interests. Ghana has a reputation as one of Africa's most democratic countries, with a vibrant and pluralistic media environment where journalists expose corruption, highlight incompetence and crime, and demand accountability from the powerful and duty bearers of the country. Indeed, Chapter 12 of Article 162 of the 1992 Constitution provides strong safeguards for the freedom and independence of the press in Ghana, albeit not fully respected in practice. Press freedom in Ghana witnessed a major boost in July 2001 when the third legislative arm of government unanimously repealed the country's criminal libel and sedition laws, including sections related to sedition and defamation of the president. The legislature went further to scrap laws granting the president discretionary power to ban news outlets. As a result, all pending legal cases filed under the repeal sections were dropped. Our country's march to openness and transparency received a further boost when the 7th legislature passed the Right to Information Act. But alas, according to Media Foundation again, the same foundation for West Africa, this is what they have to say. The impressive rise has since been followed by a steep decline in recent times. The country has been recording violations on a scale and severity that defy its reputation as a democratic model in West Africa. Journalists face risk of arrest, detention, and torture from state agencies like the police, military, secret service, and political operatives of political parties, with security agents being the worst perpetrators of violations against journalists. The attacks have been systematic, and in nearly all cases, no one has been held accountable. Madam Chair, while these recent events have been a dent, I must say, our country's press freedom image is still commendable. But this is a risk of undoing all the sterling efforts of Ghanaians and the Parliament. But I have a strong belief that we have a robust democratic system capable of correcting some of these autocratic acts of leadership. After all is said and done, we can say with chest high that overall our press freedom has fostered our democratic environment, where accountability, transparency, and public participation have flourished. The next is civil liberties. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, the aggregation of the dividends I have highlighted above, that is political stability and expanded civic space and press freedom, constitute what is called civil liberties. In essence, civil liberties constitute a bedrock of democratic societies by providing the framework for individual freedoms, supporting active citizen engagement, and ensuring that government power is exercised within boundaries that protect the rights and dignity of all individuals. When civil liberties are protected, it fosters trust and confidence in democratic institutions. People are likely to believe in and support their government and legal systems when they see that their rights are respected and upheld. In the words of the second U.S. President, John Adams, these words were uttered in 1765. And what did he say? He said, "Liberty cannot be preserved without a general knowledge among the people, who have a right and a desire to know." Today in our parliament, we have a parliamentary caucus on freedom of religion or belief, working to ensure that our citizens are free to believe or not to believe. In addition, I inaugurated other caucuses, such as Disability Caucus, Women Caucus, the Young Parliamentarians Caucus, and we have also established a Human Rights Committee, opened the Office of Commissioner of Standards, a unit for anti-corruption crusade, and we have championed other causes to make sure that we improve on what is already existing. In addition, Madam, I will be stating the obvious if I say the civil liberties we are all enjoying have promoted political participation and enabled all of us to engage in political activities such as voting, campaigning, and freely joining political organizations of our choice. But alas, we face serious challenges. And I want to now turn to those challenges bedeviling our democracy. While Ghana's democracy is relatively stable and deepening, it is important to note that it has run into a headwind and is facing challenges and requires our collective efforts to save it, and most importantly, to strengthen it. The question on many minds of our citizens is, has democracy really delivered in Ghana? And this, as you all know, is a very legitimate question. The October 2023 edition of Economist magazine had this telling headline: "Africa loses faith in democracy." The magazine noted that Africans are frustrated with the sham that passes for democracy in most countries. They are also fed up with the flimsy states that provide neither security nor prosperity. Around 2/3 of them, as well as majorities in 28 of 36 polled countries, feel their countries are heading in the wrong direction. Should this continue, many Africans, especially younger ones, may be tempted to reconsider shabby social contracts and look for radical change. I think we are experiencing some things like that in Ghana. In its latest report on the Global State of Democracy 2023, International IDA, a Stockholm-based intergovernmental organization, noted, and I quote, "Across every region of the world, democracy has continued to contract, with declines in at least one indicator of democratic performance in half of the countries covered in the 2023 report. Data after data provide similar gloomy scenarios and point to declining satisfaction with the way democracy is working across Africa." Joseph Asenka, the head of Afrobarometer, says the failures of governments and elected leaders to meet popular democratic aspirations have, to quote, led to a decline in popular confidence in democratic governance and an increasing attraction to military rule and intervention. Madam Chair, while our country remains an island in a turbulent region, it is not immune to the conditions that have given rise to the growing, declining faith in democracy amongst our people. Having been part of our democratic journey for the past 32 years, permit me, Madam Chair, to state the obvious. There are serious challenges. The first challenge confronting our democracy is the source of our democracy, our Constitution. The architecture of the Constitution, 1992, is complex. It is based on a principle of separation of powers, as well as a system of overlapping personnel and powers, resulting in a very difficult hybrid of the presidential, the parliamentary, and the traditional system of government. I venture to submit that the focus of the first brains behind the drafting of this Constitution was to achieve political stability. If my guess is right, I must admit we have succeeded in doing just that at the expense of development. We now have to move on to focus on development. I don't need to call on you that it's very urgent for us to take up the constitutional transformation. I agree with Ghanaians who say that there's nothing to reform. We have to transform everything. This Constitution has many defects, and the time to fix those defects has been long overdue. While the defects are too many to cite in this paper, I'll just highlight 3 of them and how they have impacted the work of Parliament. One is the excessive executive power that many analysts have complained about over the years. And this is as a result of the fusion of executive and legislative powers and the hybridization of the parliamentary and presidential systems, giving the executive a huge and unequivocal presence in Parliament. Our democracy is supposed to stand on 3 legs: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, with equal powers. Yet, the framers of the Constitution created a powerful executive to the detriment of the 2 other branches of government. We thus have a system that stands on 1 strong leg and 2 weak legs. So, how can you have vertical accountability? To the extent that Parliament can pass through all the processes and pass a bill, the President will not only refuse to assent, he will even refuse to receive it. Yet, Ghanaians tolerate such. And one of the weaknesses of this country is civil obedience. In the Constitution, 1992, the executive and legislature are theoretically 2 independent centers of power, equal and coordinate in several ways. In practice, however, executive power is dominant, enjoying the advantage of vested capacity and actual control over the immense resources of the state. So the office of the president can have about 3 billion Ghana cedis for a budget. The whole arm of parliament can have about 600 million. And that arm of government has to checkmate the executive, which is all embedded in the president by our constitution. And so we have, for example, about 98% of our national budget always allocated to the executive. The legislature and the judiciary each struggle to get 1%. Yet, we are equal. I don't need to tell you how difficult it will be to oversee such, what's the word for it? I will say Frankenstein, monster. And this is as a result of the marriage between the executive and the legislature, blessed by the Constitution. Number 2 is the fact that our Constitution has no room for power sharing. This has led to what many describe as the syndrome of winner takes all. Once a party wins power, all other parties are practically excluded from participating in the governance of the country. This makes our politics a zero-sum game, which analysts like Sir Arthur Lewis have argued is not conducive to plural societies and must be avoided. In his recent reflections on the making of the 1992 Constitution, our own Nana Dr. SKB Asante argued that rather than the zero-sum model, plural societies like Ghana should create political institutions which, to quote him, give all the various groups the opportunity to participate in decision-making, since only thus can they feel that they are full members of a nation, respected by their more numerous breeding, and owing equal respect to the national bond which holds them together. In his recent memoir, my very good elderly brother, Honorable Dr. Adokufo, had this to say, and I'm quoting him: in our country, most political parties have ethnic biases. These biases seem to have become permanent attachments, which, if not well managed, may lead to ethnic conflicts with political veneer. The winner takes all aspect of the Constitution engenders anxiety and resentment in the citizens or ethnic groups on the losing side. One must bear in mind that in a developing country like Ghana, opportunities for positive advancement, either as an individual or as a community, are limited outside the realm of the state. Since victory in national elections gives complete control of state resources to the victorious party, those on the losing side forfeit the possibility of acquiring influential positions in society, business contracts, employment avenues, and in the case of talented youth, even scholarships for postgraduate and advanced professional studies. These are some of the factors that make opposition hell. For these reasons, those in power will fight till death to retain it. And those in opposition will stop at nothing to wrestle power from the ruling party. The situation may partly be responsible for the many elections-related upheavals which are experienced in many parts of the African continent. As a matter of fact, the country, that is Ghana, is already seriously polarized. Ghana cannot be the permanent exception to the conflict afflicting other African countries. Unquote. These are not my words. They are the words of Honorable Dr. Adokufo. But I quote them with approval. And now you understand why the leaders of the two parties are trading those words. I won't hand over to somebody I've beaten twice. We'll do all it can to maintain power. The response. This time around, I won't go to court. Now, helpless citizens, we are caught up in the middle. When I get there, you understand. The next challenge is the trust deficit. In the 2021 survey by the Afrobarometer in 34 African countries, including Ghana, parliaments and their members were the least trusted of public institutions. In Ghana, Afrobarometer Round 6 survey a few years ago noted that the military enjoys an appreciable level of trust of Ghanaians. But the tax department, local government body, the police, parliament, ruling party, electoral commission, the president, courts of law, opposition political parties do not appear trustworthy to Ghanaians. The survey goes on to say that large majorities of Ghanaians perceive some or most or all of the foreign public officials to be involved in corruption. In fact, the percentages, police is 89%. Government officials, 86%. Members of parliament, 85%. Judges and magistrates, 85%. Tax officials, 85%. DCs, 84%. Local government representatives, 83%. Electoral Commission, the empire. You want the figure? Your guess is as good as mine. In the same category, but better, 81%. Madam Chair, clearly, the people who lead do not trust us. And if you lead people and they don't trust you, you cannot achieve anything. Because it's they who produce, not you. You lead, you tap their resources, their energy, their collective wisdom for them to produce once you agree. But when they don't trust your leadership, anything you say, it's playing politics. And that is the refrain now in Ghana. Anything you say, it's playing politics, which means he's just spewing falsehood. This is a serious challenge to our democracy. I'll give you the last one. And that's a challenge to do with relevance. Given the low trust levels and given that many believe democracy has not delivered, our democracy and parliament in particular is faced with the challenge of relevance and the need to prove to citizens that we can deliver on our mandate, particularly holding the executive to account and ensuring that corruption and waste are at the barest minimum in all our countries. Recently in Kenya, citizens went after the MPs and set a part of the parliament ablaze. What did they say? The MPs are irrelevant and they are a part of, instead of being a solution to their daily problems. This was 10 clear years after similar occurrence in Burkina Faso, where the whole brand new parliament I visited a few years after that was set ablaze by dissatisfied citizens. This tells us how important the question of relevance is. If we do not prove our worth to the people we represent and lead, the writings are clear on the wall in Ghana. So those of you who think that sometimes when I say what I say on the floor of the House, I'm being autocratic, you have to revise your notes. There can be no democracy without discipline. We need to solve this. But the challenge of the MPs is just one, which is also in the Constitution. That is the biggest challenge. Who is our MP? Is he a trustee with independence or a delegate with a mandate? You know, the trustee, as stated by Edmund Burke of Bristol, and I want to quote him. He was one of the elected members of the United Kingdom House of Commons. And this is what he said: Parliament is not a congress of ambassadors from different and hostile interests, which interests each must maintain as an agent and advocate against other agents and advocates. But Parliament is a deliberative assembly of one nation with one interest, that of the whole, where not local prejudices ought to guide, but the general good, resulting from the general reason of the whole. You choose a member, indeed you do. But when you have chosen him, he is not a member of Bristol, but he is a member of Parliament. And so when you are referring to your members, you don't say member of Ododo. You say member of Parliament, the Parliament of Ghana. This view has been rejected by many who argue that popular sovereignty requires a representative to do as his constituents wish, regardless of his own policy preferences or judgments. This approach is referred to as delegate with a mandate. And that shows the differences between the UK system and the US system. The UK is delegate with a mandate from the party, What the party says, you must go by it. If you don't, they apply 3-line whip, and the whip system is strong. In the US, no. You are independent. You represent the interests of your people. They trust your capability, your intellect and experience, and they've asked you to go and do your best to make them better. So they allow you to think and use your conscience. In Ghana, what have we done to our MPs? Which of the 2 schools do they belong to? That is embedded in our constitution. So we call that the dilemma of the member of parliament. The party simply give him a letter to stand on their ticket. I used to go sourcing for resources to campaign to win the seat. And he does so with the constituents who struggle day and night to convince people to vote for them. When he gets into parliament, because of that single letter, he's captured by the party. And he comes in to ask, where should I vote? He said, oh, we are voting here. Well, you've heard the debate, or you know what is happening, that's where you are to vote. But I must tell you that the MPs think they are delegates with a mandate. Madam Chair, this challenge has worsened the situation, and it has exacerbated social and ethnic tensions, and this can affect national cohesion and stability. Most issues in our country, including in Parliament, are viewed from a binary perspective. And I can tell you, a majority of your members of Parliament are conflicted and faced with the dilemma of party versus issue-based politics. This is the classic dichotomy between the member of Parliament as a representative of the people or that of a party or president, and has hindered bipartisan cooperation and consensus building on many issues, many most important national issues that come before the House. And every morning, presiding over this hung Parliament, I have to sit with the leaders every morning in my lobby, spending hours trying to get them to come closer to each other, to let us agree to disagree. So every day we do that before I go to preside, but I still get surprises on the floor. So over the decades, our elections have been marred by hyper polarization, the 2 major political parties going to court to contest electoral outcomes, and each failing in their effort to outturn the results. I think this is a lesson enough. That is why in my maiden speech to the House, I made this statement, and I want to quote it. I believe that the people of Ghana, in voting as they did in the last elections, have signaled their frustration with and disapproval of the party-first mindset and the associated unbridled partisanship and partisan polarization that have taken root in our politics, and are giving our option of multi-party democracy a very bad name. And so here we are, We are supposed to have the power of the purse. But even when our budget is approved, to quote the late Right Honorable Peter Alajete, Parliament has to go to the Minister of Finance cap in hand, begging for the ministry to release its funds. So it's not only you. The organ that you have empowered to ensure that this is done itself goes begging for its own resources to be released. And as I talk, go and ask whether our third quarter has been released. And we are still begging them to do so. So until we get the power of the purse, we will continue to labor in vain. Madam Chair, this is where we are now. And if we don't take care, the worst that has happened to our country is the introduction of money into politics. But as we were told by Herbert Alexander, political power is built upon three constituencies: the electoral, the financial, and the organizational. I don't want to touch the electoral because of what is happening, or else they may brand me partisan, and it will make me difficult to handle my house. So I won't go there. What I'm trying to do is to try to bring all stakeholders on board. And that's why I introduced the Democracy Cup. And I got the chairperson of the Draft Commission, the Chief Justice, her leadership. I got the IGP, the CDS, other stakeholders for us to get the two main football giants in the country, Kumasi Ashanti Kotoko and Accra House of Oats, to play a match at the Accra Sports Stadium. And I brought all the ex-players of Ghana Black Stars to play an opening curtain match with my members of parliament. Actually, we beat them 3-1. So we don't only make law, we are also stars in the forum. And so this is very serious. But the cost of politics is so high that the investment that candidates and their financiers need to secure election is beyond the means of all honest citizens. Recent studies by CDD Ghana show that it costs approximately $100 million and $693,000 to effectively fund presidential and parliamentary campaigns respectively. As a former practitioner and now a dormant participant, I can say without a shadow of doubt that this is an understatement. 275 pickups. Each constituency must have at least one pickup. 16 regions. The executives must have strong four-wheel drives. The national executives, now I don't know their number, sometimes 30 something. They must have to be able to go around the country. I'm talking about only vehicles. I'm not talking about the other logistics. And I'm not talking about the individual members moving from community to community. If you don't visit our community, we will never vote for you because you don't respect us. So we want you. And even when you come, you just don't come and talk to us and go free. If not, we haven't seen you. So, Madam Chair, money may not guarantee electoral success, but it is rare that electoral success comes to those with very little money. Some of you have practiced it. So our democracy is slowly becoming an auction, and the highest bidder wins. Some of our best and brightest are shying away from politics, yet there's a lot of evidence to the fact that for a country to develop, it must be led by its best brains. The example of Singapore is instructive. And so, people are now not thinking about your capacity. That is irrelevant to holding political office. What is relevant is the size of your wallet. And to borrow from my once upon a time good friend, Honorable Oseche Mensah-Bonsu, the former majority leader, if I may ask, is that what we want for our dear country? We need to reset the system. If not, our fourth attempt at democratization will fail, paving the way for the people to take over the realms of governance. It will not be military. It will be civil unrest. And when the people take over the power, which is already theirs, those of you who are in some class, you know where you belong. Madam Chair, while this might sound alarming, the recent spate of military coups in our sub-region has raised concerns for all of us. And again, I go to our Afrobiometer, and this is how they put it. The continent may be riding global wave of democratic recession back to the military regimes of yesteryear. The sight of ordinary Malians twice in a year and the Guineans pouring into the streets to celebrate military takeovers prompts important questions about the future of African democratization. I pray that it doesn't happen in Ghana. But prayer alone is not sufficient. We have to work towards it. And I want to remind all of you about what Albert Einstein said. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. Are we together? And I conclude. Given the portrait I have painted of our democratic journey over the last 32 years, I believe many of you might be tempted to go away from here with a pessimistic view of our journey and what lies ahead. And let me clarify that despite our challenges, there is no better alternative than that of democracy. None has yet been developed. The young ones should pray that they don't experience what we experience. I belong to the group that we call Aluta graduates, where we had to face the bullets. We lost some of our members fighting for this country to return to democratic rule. That was the time they brought in blue Mowaks for the Ghana Police Service. And they used to drive them straight into this university. And we could only hide in the Achimuta forest. And our beautiful ladies who were left in Volta Hall, what happened to them? They were raped. They were lashed. That is the alternative. So if you prefer that, that is for you to decide. And so I can only go to President Obama, who said that democracy will work only if we fight for it. We must strive as a people to create our own model of democracy and fight for it to work. We don't need to copy slavishly from our colonial masters. And other countries are developing and moving ahead. Rwanda, 1994, genocide. We were there to try to solve the problem. Go there and see the difference between Rwanda and Ghana. I've been there a number of times to study their systems. Their speaker is a lady, tall, elegant, beautiful lady. The president is taller than her in a way. So we need to stand up. You gave me the mandate to serve for 4 years. That's what I've been called upon to do. After that, I can earn my own living. Even from my legacy. If you do good, you do for yourself. If you do bad, you do for yourself. But I can assure Ghanaians that in today's world, there is no place to hide. So those who believe that politics is for aggrandizement, you have to rethink. Don't think that when you are out of office, you have somewhere to hide that we can't get you. You saw what happened to the Lebanese. It's just a trigger in what? Mobile phones. How many died? Current affairs. Many of you don't know. So please, with these submissions, I thank you very much for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. May God continue to bless our homeland Ghana and make it better, greater, and stronger. Long live Ghana's democracy, and long live those who will fight for it to work. Thank you so much.